My name is Manuel Morales, and I am addicted to health checks. This is like a lame addiction to have, but it's kind of happen. So when you have a system that grows in complexity, doesn't matter if it's a monolith of a microservices architecture, eventually you end up with many, many things that can go wrong. Are those microservices alive and capable of talking to each other? Is MongoDB taking very, very long to respond? Did your AWS keys expire randomly? Did you forget to write the right password in that configuration YAML file? Or you forgot to run the migrations? Or the most ironic of them, did you forget to configure your error notification properly? For that reason, we started resorting to health checks. A health check is a very simple thing. We implemented it as a single endpoint in which that endpoint will make all those checks and return 200 if everything went well, and a 500 if one of those went wrong. And hopefully it also gives you some information on what went wrong. And when you have all of these things causing you stress, having one single endpoint that you can query to see if they are well or not is a nice, warm feeling that you get addicted to. When do we use them? Well, we use them in several scenarios. We use them every time we deploy a new version of a microservice, because you can forget the migration, so you forgot to update the config file. Or we also, when you configure that service for the first time, not only when you deploy it, but also when you are configuring your local machine. You boot one of those services for the first time. First thing you do, you go to the health check. You can test that everything is OK. Our monitoring tools are polling the health checks constantly to make sure that everything is OK. And they're also useful in troubleshooting. Something goes wrong, monitoring tools show that everything is on fire. You just go to one of the health checks, and they will start pointing to each other until you find the original culprit. Because we were implementing this thing over and over again in different microservices, of course, we built a library for that. It's open source. It's in the form of a gem. It's called MiniCheck. Very easy to implement. You just build a new health check, and you say it's a RAG application where you can say which endpoint do you want to expose it, and you start registering the different checks that you want to check. The database connection, the Redis client, all of those, and you mounted one more RAG middleware, Rails, RAG, anything. Funny story, be careful of what are you testing here. It's not a good idea that in order to check if microservices can talk to each other, that microservices poll each other's health check. Because if one of the services is calling the other service health check, and for any reason that service depends on the original one, by design, by the way, they will start making requests to each other in an endless loop that will break down both services. A friend told me. When you query the endpoint that you configured before, you get the two checks and how long they took to run, and if they are healthy. If they fail, you get the error, the exception, and the stack trace. Notice how this is information disclosure. Careful with this. If you're running this in production, hide these endpoints behind Apache or something. You don't want hackers to know to get this kind of information from your services. We not also do Ruby. We also do Elixir. For that reason, Manuel Alejandro, who is here, and Roberto Espejo, who couldn't come today, they built the Elixir equivalent one, and there is an example project, which name you will never know. It's called Gondor. I can tell you they are better than I am giving names to libraries. And of course, every other technical company that is in this room, we are, of course, hiding. We have offices in London, and we are about to open offices in Barcelona next month. Thank you very much.
there in the middle.
Try.
Yeah. Okay. Hello. So I'm here to talk to you about Warm Blanket, which is a gem to get rid of crappy after boot performance. So what do I mean about crappy after boot performance? So the problem is it's usual for our web services to start up and have unpredictable latency on the first request. So that happens because you might have lazy code loading. So the first request hits some code path and you have auto load and you are going to start loading gems and classes and code and initializing singletons and all that. So that's going to take some time. Maybe you have lazy database connections. So the first request is the one that pays all the round trips to start all the database connections, all the logging, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe you're using just an in-time compilation version of Ruby, which you're using mjit or JRuby or truffle Ruby, and you know that the first few requests or first tens or hundreds of requests will pay a lot in latency, and you'll have a problem there because that means that when you restart your service, when you deploy your service, your users will be like this, and they will not be very happy because your app will be randomly slow at random times, and if you have multiple servers, then it means that someone's going to get lucky all the time, basically. So we had this problem at Talkdesk, and the solution is the Warm Blanket gem, which basically takes care of it. So the idea is that Warm Blanket warms up your web service and by looping over a configurable number of HTTP requests. So you configure some HTTP requests that you believe are representative of the usual workload of your application, and when your application starts, Warm Blanket connects to the web service and starts doing those requests in a loop, so that all of your autoloads, databases, and JIT start warming up. And the idea is that if you're using EuRuKo, you can use pre-boot, which gives you 3 minutes until your dyno is put into production. So on those 3 minutes, you can warm up your application. If you're on Kubernetes, you can do something similar. You can tell Kubernetes, wait for a bit while my application is doing something, and that something is priming up the JIT, starting up everything, so your performance is always awesome. So that means that with Warm Blanket, you get consistent high performance from the first request, at least as users see it. So I'm EuRuKo2017. I blog about Ruby and JRuby and stuff, so that is my blog, and find me on Twitter. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jan Lillis from Berlin, and where can I change it? Here. So in my free time, I like to explore Ruby for crazy stuff. And then, that's right, okay. All right, so, and then I write about this stuff on my Ruby blog. Check it out. The other day I was documenting the Ruby standard library, and I noticed that it will be gemified, which is a great thing, I say. So every standard library will become a gem. That's the goal. And it should be completed in one of the next Ruby versions. And it's done by, I hope I have the order correct, by Hiroshi Shibata, who is actually at EuRuKo, I've heard. And there's a difference between what a standard library becomes. So there are two kinds of standard gems. There are default gems and bundle gems. And default gems is like a current standard library. So you can require it without loading anything. You can just require it because it's part of your Ruby source. It also cannot be removed. and it's maintained by the Ruby core. Examples are OpenSSL, JSON, RDoc, and also starting with Ruby 2.5, Bundler will be part of the standard library as a default gem. The other thing are bundle gems. They are pretty similar to normal gems, but you don't need to install them because they are already installed. And you also don't need a network connection when you fire up Ruby because they come with Ruby. And they are maintained externally, not in Ruby core. And examples you might know are Minitest, Rake, Did You Mean, or Power Assert. Check it on your laptop, list all gems, and you will see a gem called Power Assert is among them. So why to do this? So I think the main reason is a gem can be updated and developed outside of the usual Ruby release cycles, which is a really good thing, I'd say. And also, it will become easier for different Ruby implementations to maintain the standard library. For example, JRuby has a set of patches that it applies to the standard library, which might be a thing of history. So, but what could be possibly cons? And I'd say maybe it will become really unclear which Ruby version comes with which version of which default gem. And also, where should I direct my pull request to? Is it still Ruby core? Is it the gem repository? There's still some room for misunderstandings. But yeah, that is one of the reasons why I put up standardgems.org. It lists like every standard gem for every Ruby version. And yeah, check it out. But in the end, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And it's progress. It also means a lot of huge parts of or huge portions of the standard library are not so maintained. And I think this is a good point where they get some attention. And maybe they will be maintained again because someone feels more like maintaining a gem, which, I mean, a lot of people are maintaining gems. So it's not so complicated anymore to maintain maybe a standard library gem. Or maybe some even get removed or replaced by alternatives that do similar things. And that's all. I hope you have a great party in 2 hours and a happy day too.
Thank you. So we are looking for Viktor Shepelev. Oh, you were here, sorry.
Hi all. The gem I am planning to talking about, I already did one attempt a year ago at previous EuRuKo at the same lightning talks. Maybe some of you have seen it. The thing is, the gem, unlike the previous shown today, is a bit of idealistic work, and I tried to present it in the right way and started with a great introduction, and that introduction took 5 minutes and half of a minute, and then I get to real work, and gem expected that internet would be on, and it was off. So today I'll try to avoid all these errors. I'll prepare the code beforehand to show, and I will not talk at all. I hope the code will speak for itself. So let's start. I hope it is huge enough, but if it is not, it's too late to fix. That's it.
Hello, everybody. My presentation is going to be a little more low-tech and something more basic. My question is, who here wants to be really fast at fixing bugs and at extending functionality? Anybody? I hope for more takers. Who here wants to be really happy coding? A little more takers. And for that, I find that having good names in your code counts a lot. And I don't know if you remember your university days, but the kind of code examples you used to get usually started with A and finished with Z or Y. And it was really messy, really hard to find out what is happening there, what's the logic. It took a whole bunch of time. And this is something that I stress a lot with my juniors and the developers, the team of developers that I'm working with, is that good names is basically half the battle, if not more. Because good code, in my opinion, should read like a piece of prose or literature, and you basically see exactly what the intention is, what the programmer wanted to achieve, and what's happening there, what's the logic, basically what's the algorithm behind it all. I have another question. Who here was like stopped or had like major problems in solving a problem because they found like some ugly code that they had to work on or improve on? Getting better. And actually, I stress the need to write better code, not just better code, just give it good names. It can be crappy code, but if you have good names for it, you can follow the logic. And I want you to do it for yourself, because usually you work on a feature, you finish it, goes to production, 6 months later, the boss comes in one of those long meetings, says, oh, we want this other stuff to be done there. And then you go to your code and it's like, what was I thinking? What is going on? It could be like the code that somebody else wrote and you basically have to start from scratch. And also, if you give good names, you're going to be happy yourself when you have to work, and your colleagues are going to love you when they have to work on your code. Some of them, maybe they'll start fighting to work like, okay, who wrote that feature? Okay, I want to extend it to see exactly. And one thing that that I would like you to try out is when you have the main method that you're doing the work on, don't have there everything like with loops and everything. Just extract all those parts in smaller methods, private methods, give them really great names, and that way when you read the code of the method, you know exactly where you have to do the changes. So for example, if you have like a user sign up, instead of having all the logic shoved in, just have something that says, okay, create the user, email the user his password, add him on social media. So all the steps. So if somebody gets a request that says, we would like to change when the email gets sent, when that developer gets there to that method, knows exactly where they have to make the change because it's written right there. And as an ending thought, if you ever think you should write a comment to explain your code, you're not giving good names.
Okay, hello everyone. Hello everyone. I'm going to talk today about a project or set of projects that I created, which is called TTY. They help you create terminal applications in Ruby. Because there's one observation: Ruby is not web frameworks. There's a lot of stuff that can be built outside of web. And I also want to help people to kick Bash habit, which I kicked successfully myself. So where you can find the project, there's a website. You can see all the packages built in. And you can find the source on GitHub. Google is your friend. So currently, I've got 15 components. I'm not going to show you all of them, but I'm going to show you a couple of them. So the first one is TTY prompt, which this year won Fukuoka Ruby Award GMO Pepabo, which is MATS approved. So how you might use this component? Obviously, you require it, and then you instantiate your prompt, and then hopefully this is a choice of drinks at the after party. And then that's how it looks in terminal. Right. So this is another type of prompt. There's many of them. So if you're building terminal applications, I'm sure you will find something useful. Another component is called TTY Progress Bar. Recently, I was working with Puppet Labs to introduce some multi-rendering. So for instance, you create a multi-progress bar, then you register a few bars with it, and then let them off to run in different threads. And that could be your result. Similarly, when you've got unknown progress, Thank you very much. When you've got unknown progress, for instance, this is a dummy downloading of files. You create a multi-spinner, register spinners, register the jobs, and then call also spin, and that's the result. So this is used by Puppet Labs in their tooling. So you might be wondering, okay, there's all these components, and I don't really know how to build terminal applications. I've got you covered as well. So I started working on this executable called teletype, because I don't give you extra points for figuring why I can't call TTY, this executable TTY. It works on top of bundler, because I just feel it's a good practice to start creating things as gems. Even if you don't want to publish it, you might want to reuse it in your company with another 2 developers. So that's how the terminal toolkit looks. Because I'm from Eastern Europe, there's the Eastern European flavor in there. There's really 2 commands that you should pay attention to, which is add and new. And new essentially piggybacks on bundler with a lot of extra stuff in it. And there's another command called add, which basically adds command. There's extra few flags that I'm not going to bore you with. This is where you can find me. And thank you.
Hi, I'm Jan. I'm from DebFoo. If you don't know what DebFoo is, we are a service to help you keep your dependencies up to date. We send pull requests to your project as soon as an update comes in. But this is not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a part of Bundler 2.0, which is coming soon. We've written a blog post about this. Just out of curiosity and out of vanity, how many of you have read that blog post? Nice, thank you. That feels good. So the part I want to talk about is that Bundler 2.0 will change a few defaults, and one of the most important one is that the files where you actually declare your dependencies are the file names are going to change. The change looks like this. So gem file is turning into gems.rb, and the gem file lock is turning into gems.locked. Why? Well, you see, let's start with the gem file. First of all, the capitalization at the beginning is a bit weird. I mean, it's coming from makefile, I guess, and procfile and all of these things, but I mean, why? And it's so different from everything else. The next thing is gem file. That's why these files are also called file files. So that's kind of superfluous if you think about it. I mean, you don't call the app folder in your Rails app folder. You call it app, right? Because it's a folder. We kind of know that. And the last thing is, so it doesn't have an extension. And so you see this file for the first time, and you don't know what's inside of it. And that's kind of not so nice. It's probably okay for humans. It's a bit more complicated for things like editors and tools and stuff. And so that's why it's probably a good idea to add an extension to that. With gemfile lock, the thing is a little bit easier. Basically, .lock is somewhat of a reserved extension for files on Unix systems because you use them for locks, actual locks on resources. And they are usually treated as temporary things. So if you have a script on your Unix server that on boot up clears all log files because it's just a newly booted up system, you may accidentally delete a gem file lock, which is probably not a good idea. And interestingly, this bug has been reported in 2010, just to give you an idea how old this issue is. How we are going to do the migration? Well, duh. The interesting thing, and I did not know that, I had to look it up, it works since bundler 1.8. That must have been like, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. Well, actually, it was somewhere in 2015. So we're done, right? Yeah, almost. So you see, the problem is not our own projects and running it in development mode. The problem is more like your code does not exist in isolation. So you have all these things that have assumptions about file structure, and sometimes they use gem files to actually detect a Ruby project. For example, Travis and EuRuKo do that. And so suddenly the gem file is no longer there, and then you deploy something to EuRuKo, and actually nothing really happens. It's kind of a bummer. So what we need to do is get all of these infrastructure things to recognize the new files. And that needs to happen soon, because let's talk about timing in the last 40 seconds. Bundler ships bundled with Ruby 2.5, and that will possibly be bundler 2.0 if everything goes right. Bundler 2.0 will ship in standalone after bundler 1.16. 1.16 is the next release, as you all know, because every time you do a bundle install, it tries to sell you that pre-release. And bundler 2.0 will still work with gemfile log, so you don't actually have to rename the files. Bundler 3.0 will not work with gemfile logs. That's what I've written in the article. Well, actually, it will. Which is interesting, because 14 days ago, and that was after we published the article, this happened. So it got removed from the RFC that described bundler 2.0. And I think that's a good thing. So is this good or bad? I don't know really. Anyway, check out devfoo.com. Thank you very much.
Oh, what a day. Thank you for our amazing lightning talk speakers today. I think all of them were really interesting. So just a few last announcements. Take EuRuKo home. Please don't forget it. You can still send your proposals to hi@EuRuKo2017.org. Okay, and also read the blog posts, please. We published several blog posts during the past few days, so please read them. There are a lot of details there. Party at 8 a.m. at Ankered. Please don't forget your badge, because we will let you in only if you have the badge. I hope you had a great time. I had a great time. See you at the party and see you tomorrow. Thank you.